Well, hello, this is Jeremiah Gibson with the New England Association of Family and Systemic Therapy, and I am here excited to be joined this morning by Stan Tatkin. Stan is in LA. He is the founder and creator of the Psychobiological Approach to Couples and Family Therapy. And Stan is, we're honored to have Stan in Massachusetts in the fall of 2019. He'll be in Northampton, working with the Northampton Center for Couples Therapy with Carrie Lissignan and her group. So Stan, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
So Stan is the author of many books. I'll let you talk about the books that I don't mention, but the most recent book is called We Do, Saying Yes to Relationships of Depth, True Connection, and Enduring Love. And Stan, I'm curious about some of the other books that you've written as well. Wired, some of the other books.
Yeah, Wired for Love, Wired for Dating, and Love and War in Intimate Relationships, and 2 direct audio books through Sounds True, Your Brain on Love, and Relationship RX.
Excellent. So you can find all of these books on Amazon if you must. Please also contact your independent local bookstore and encourage them to carry Stan's books as well. So one of the things that we're doing is helping to market the event in October and November in Northampton. And I'm curious, if someone were to do a 2-day training with you, what are some things that they could expect?
Wow. Learning, I would hope.
Excellent. What are some things that folks can expect to learn?
In the 2-day introductory learning, people will get an overview of PACT, a psychobiological approach to couple therapy, which is a polytheoretical nonlinear approach that integrates developmental neuroscience, arousal regulation theory, and attachment theory, in particular infant attachment. That may sound strange, but you know, the literature in infant attachment is more robust, and that was what this was based on. This started off as working with mother-infant pairs for prevention, and morphed into adult pair bonding. And so a lot of this comes from developmental psychology, and people will start to learn a little bit about strategic and structural family systems, trance work. This is Ericksonian trance work, social justice theory. We won't get into any psychoanalysis. We rely on American object relations primarily when we're dealing with very difficult cases. And developmental neuroscience, Gestalt, body psychotherapies. This is very somatic. But primarily it's a highly strategic approach. So people will get a good smattering.
Yeah, and when you say highly strategic, what are you referring to?
Well, because in the tradition of strategic family systems, strategic approaches, we basically work the couple. They're the stars, they're center stage. But to say we're a little bit manipulative, you know, in the strategic tradition, we basically are a few steps ahead in terms of how we work. For instance, instead of interpreting things, we set people up, we set the stage, we create the experience, and then interpret. In other words, when people are under pressure, which is what we do, they begin to tell us more about who they are, what they really want, and what they're up to. And that's what we're about. We investigate quickly to get a lot of information through a variety of channels, really only one of which is narrative. Most of it is through the face, through the voice, through the eyes, the pupils, body movements, all the nonverbals. So we track micro expressions and micro movements, and we use digital video for playback so they can see, if we need them, to see themselves in slow motion, frame by frame, and so on, so they can see what they're actually doing.
Yeah. As in this training, what is the role of the therapist? Like, what is the stance of the therapist?
The therapist is at once an audience member. We're on rolling chairs. They are too. And we're able to roll back, lower ourselves and let them go face to face. We put them face to face right off the bat. Um, and we do that quite a bit to have them deal with each other. But we also use the chairs to roll in, to get them to move together, to get them to move apart, to do different things, to mix it up, to track somatic reactions. So the therapist is an evocateur at times,
Mm-hmm.
a coach at times, as a surgeon at times, as a trial lawyer at times, as a CSI investigation person looking at the chalk on the floor, going back to the scene of the crime.
Right.
We, as a parent at times, we put on different hats for different jobs within the session.
Yeah.
So,
And how do you train therapists and remind therapists how to play which of the roles that you described and when?
that's a pedagogic challenge, right? It is, teaching therapists how to not only use certain skill sets, but to use their body, their face, and be able to relax their body when under a lot of stress. There's a lot of moving parts in PACT, which is why it's a little bit more challenging, but a lot more fun than the other approaches. We kind of think of it as, reductionistic on the top level in terms of using developmental theory to approximate where people are. But the real work is phenomenological and improvisational, a little bit like jazz.
Yeah.
And so if you don't like to paint by the numbers, but you do like to be disciplined and stay within a certain frame, this is the approach for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. If someone were to come to the training, what are some things that they would need to know ahead of time?
Well, I think that, mostly it takes a while to learn any kind of complicated or complex theory.
Right.
People don't get it right away.
Mm-hmm.
They have a basic understanding, but it takes about a year before people start to grok it.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a couple years before they really start to. There's just a lot of moving parts. And believe it or not, sometimes people who are new to the field have a little bit of an easier time sometimes because they're unburdened by years and years of practicing a certain way.
Sure.
For instance, one of the things that people, have to learn is how to look at the opposite person when someone's talking.
Right.
That doesn't come natural. That has to be
Sure.
trained into people.
Well, in particular, if you have couples facing each other,
That's right.
as opposed to facing you on a couch, that can create some retraining, I would imagine.
It does, and they usually start off in a V position, V or straight on. So it's not always that way, but mostly we have them turn to each other and deal with each other so that we can roll back, be the audience, and get a sense of how this couple actually operates moment by moment. Because we're actually not focused on content. We're focused on what they do, how they interact, almost micro moment by micro moment. And so we're basically catching people in the act of being themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I love this metaphor of being an audience member. It's almost like you're watching a movie.
Yes.
Of a dynamic being played out.
That's right.
And I'm curious, what are the most important things that you would encourage a couples therapist to look for as they're watching the movie of the dynamic?
To look for everything. The way people's we get baselines right away. We teach therapists how to get baselines, and from there we start to collect tells. We start to be able to tell behavioral markers, things that happen somatically that give people away, because we find that narratives are unreliable for the most part. People lie. Not only do they lie, and that's a normal state of affairs, but people mostly don't know what they're doing most of the time, and that's because of the way the brain works. We're about 99% automatic every day. We operate on memory, and because real time is too fast and recognition systems are lightning fast, people can't really know what they're doing. They're acting and reacting automatically.
Sure.
And so as long as they're under a certain amount of stress, that we'll catch them like I said, we'll see often between the words, between the movements. We pretty much look for people in the spaces
Mm-hmm.
they don't think we're looking. And so we're capturing information much faster. We're using forensic techniques to cross information to get the question from the non-target partner. And this allows us to be a little bit more sneaky in the way we get information.
Yeah. I'm thinking of something that my supervisor has said. Don't trust anything that's in your head.
Don't trust anything that's in your head, because you've never lived outside of your head, and you never will.
Right.
Your world is inside your head.
And that's absolutely, and that's, I think, an ongoing struggle for a lot of therapists, in particular, a lot of couples therapists.
Yeah.
I'm curious, on the one hand, there's this idea of don't live inside your head, and the therapist is kind of the outside observer. On the other hand, we're also doing a lot of, we're relying on some of the pieces of neuroscience.
Yes.
To develop, to develop forward motion and to develop interventions with couples. I'm curious, what are some ways that you have incorporated neuroscience into the PACT model?
Well, one of the things PACT therapists will eventually have to learn is a really good working understanding of how the brain operates, particularly how it developed, how it operates, and that includes the neuroendocrine system. So we get into the weeds a bit for those who are not faint of heart. But we find that understanding the biology, that's why this is a psychobiological approach, psychology plus, basically we're looking at how the mind and body operates, from the developmental point of view and under stress. So, what we're looking at basically are two nervous systems interacting, or actually three, because it's our own as well. So we're having to track our own somatic reactions as we're watching, using kind of an outsight meditative discipline to pay attention to every single detail that's in front of us visually and auditorily. And so we're basically tracking not just what people say, but how they say it.
Yeah.
We also track linguistics as well, using Paul Grice's maxims.
Tell us more about that, Grice's maxims.
Yeah. This is to determine whether people are being honest.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Whether they're saying too much, saying too little, leading us around the bend, misleading us, being tangential, using deflection, contradiction. All of those things are signs of deception, and we track that quite a bit. So all of this basically to move the ball forward a little quicker and to get to know who we're dealing with faster.
Yeah. One of the metaphors that you've used to describe this is the word wired.
Wired, yes.
Yes. Books with that title. I'm curious, how do couples receive that language?
Quite well, because it's in the vernacular, the popular vernacular, this idea of being wired. We're wired to pair bond, we're wired to be with others, we're wired to speak at a certain age, literally. We are dependent. The human primate is a dependent animal. It has its autonomy, but that's a little overstated these days. We are built to pair bond within herds. We are fundamentally, as the species, fundamentally warlike, fundamentally selfish and self-centered. We are always aware of what's missing and what we don't have. We're always comparing and contrasting. We're xenophobic. We are whimsical, but also fickle and moody. What could possibly go wrong, right? We have memories that really don't work as we think. We are misunderstanding each other most of the time. Our communication is terrible even on a good day. And our perceptions are like a funhouse mirror. So there we go. I mean, that is not pathology. That's the human condition we're dealing with. And this is everybody. So when we're watching couples and we're studying them through microanalysis of digital video, we're starting to learn basically how the human animal is operating in this milieu, and that's what we're studying.
Yeah.
And it's that way no matter whether you're dealing with somebody from Africa or from the Middle East or from Asia. Here people are pretty much the same all over.
Yeah, there's this ongoing battle in couples therapy that I'm sure you're far more aware of than I am, between differentiation and attachment.
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble with my dear friend.
I sure am, yeah. And of course, the answer is yes. The answer is both. But you got to start somewhere. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think that you began to answer this a little bit, but I am curious to learn a little bit more about how you chose to start with attachment in the hope that secure attachment then kind of leads to differentiation rather than the other way around.
Well, it kind of goes to American object relations, which influenced me quite a bit as I was mentored by James Masterson.
Okay.
And because for a long while I specialized in personality disorders. And so if you take American object relations, which is basically a form of ego psychology, you work in terms of adaptation, right? Getting people to function with a reality ego, with an executive function that is actually basically the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex right here, to do the right thing, to be able to stave off feeling better for getting better, right? And so rather than work on the relationship initially, we're working on the basic trustworthiness, readiness, ability of partners to be in a two-person psychological system, which by definition requires differentiation.
Of course.
And in this situation cannot do it.
Right.
So the road is paved basically with an approach to push development forward.
Sure.
Because in couples, we don't have the time to do the individual work that we would do if we were dealing with developmental delays.
Right.
So we're pushing both partners forward using a variety of means. It's not that we don't care. We do care about trauma. We work with trauma, but we also believe that trauma is no excuse for acting badly in a relationship.
Sure.
When both people are depending on each other's loyalty and devotion and reliability, because secure functioning, apart from being secure functioning is not simply an attachment idea, it is a social justice idea. That partners are in the foxhole together, that they rely on each other for survival and to thrive, and they have a job to do, basically a duty to protect each other from each other and everybody else, and to lift each other up and to create the resources that allows development to move forward.
Sure.
So it's a different frame.
Absolutely. I haven't considered that idea of secure attachment being a social justice issue before. And I'm curious.
Right. Secure functioning is. Secure attachment is something that is earned through lots of interaction with somebody in a manner that is secure.
Sure.
So
it's an important distinction.
Right. So secure functioning is the behavioral model of what people do and the ideas that they have that allow them to operate together collaboratively and cooperatively.
Yeah. So one of our members, Peter Jones, has done an excellent review of your book, and he's done a great review of the book We Do. Check out the review. For those of you that are watching this, check out the review on our website, www.neafast.org, NEFAST, NEAFAST. Peter writes the following: the job of couples is twofold, with a need to explore and develop explicitly their shared vision on one hand, and on the other hand, to watch for how their minds and bodies and brains can play tricks on them. How did he do in summarizing PACT?
I think that's great. I do. I think that's great. Our minds and bodies are playing tricks on us all the time. And unbelievably, many times we take them a little too literally, because of the human error potentials of the mind that people don't really understand. And we do definitely have built in these human error potentials.
Yeah. I love Peter's language of shared vision. And I'm curious, what are some ways that you help couples achieve that?
By asking them, why are you a couple? What's the point of the two of you?
Yeah.
What do you serve? What do you do for each other you couldn't pay somebody to do? And yes, you can pay somebody to love you. And so, we're setting a tone for a top-down idea here. Most everything is bottom-up, but a top-down, which is, what is your vision for the future?
Hmm.
What, what is the function of this relationship? And of course, it can't really be just about love.
Sure.
It can't be about attraction. It can't be about common interest, because that doesn't last.
Right.
It has to be something that's much more sustaining and much more meaty and meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And that is being able to trust each other with your lives, right? Have each other's backs, protect each other in public and private, to be fully transparent, to be a real team, like cop car partners who have an invested interest in protecting each other because their lives are at stake.
Right.
So it's a reframing of the couple as having a greater purpose than simply how I feel today. That's social contract theory, because if we just go by how we're feeling, we could be killing each other. We could be doing all sorts of things because we feel like it, because we don't feel like being loyal. And so these are principles that we create together. We call them shared principles of governance. This is how we govern each other. This is how we deal with the animals that we are, and to assure that we are playing well together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a higher level, higher complexity model of imagining coupledom.
Yeah. What are some questions that you ask to help couples identify their shared vision and their shared principles of governance?
Well, guys believe in putting the relationship first, and if so, why? Because if people cannot articulate and defend their principles, they won't do it. They won't adhere to them when they least feel like it. And so here we're going with Lawrence Kohlberg, and Carol Gilligan, even though we're not dealing with issues of morality, we're kind of, because in terms of secure functioning, the couple has to be committed to the idea of being fair and just and mutually sensitive most of the time. And they have to be collaborative and cooperative. Otherwise, that's not secure functioning. So these principles, we tell each other everything. My wife and I have one. If one of us is in distress, the other drops what they're doing and ministers to the other. That's just what we do. And that is kind of where the book comes in handy here. We do. It's an effort to move the culture from meism and I-ism to we-ism, and that it's not I do, it's we do. And not just in terms of vows, but in terms of how we structure our commandments, how we structure our principles, our culture. This is what we do, and this is what we don't do. We tell each other everything. And when one of us doesn't, the other reminds them, I thought that's what we do. We agreed. That should pull behavior in much better, because we're talking about mutuality. We're talking about being mutual stakeholders, not I want, I need, not right. But it's what we need in order to survive. We have to do this.
I'm curious about other ways that you encourage couples to identify those principles, those values that are guiding their relationship.
Well, I want to just back up 1 second and just clarify that this doesn't mean that the therapist calls the shots in terms of what is right.
Correct.
If partners want to use alcohol and drugs and they're okay, we don't have a dog in that fight. It's fine. Right. We only have a problem with couples, or they actually have a problem, when one person isn't happy about the decisions of the other, when they're not in agreement. So, I'm an old drug counselor, but if one person is an alcoholic and the other person is not, and they're objecting to the alcoholism, it's not a judgment that we weigh in on.
Sure.
I don't have a problem with this. You guys have a problem with it, and it's becoming a deal breaker. So you're going to have to take this off the table,
sure,
one way or the other, for good. So things work themselves out when we aim towards secure functioning, and not whether they should be doing this or shouldn't be doing this. For instance, they could be polyamorous as long as they can both adequately defend it as serving a personal good and a mutual good. A lot of people can't argue their point why this is not only good for me, but it's also good for you, Jeremiah. And let me tell you, I know you. This is why it's good for you. And those people are going to lose the argument. The people that cannot sell the other partner and why it's a good idea for them. So we just let that play out, and we make sure they play by the rules. And
I'm glad that you made that distinction, because one of the things that I'm curious about is also how you encourage self-therapist work, particularly when you're doing supervision. What are some ways that you encourage therapists to take space and to let the couple's values, the couple's principles, be the things that guide the couple session?
Well, I think, like I said, in this work, we're teaching therapists hopefully to be good therapists. It's not about PACT.
Right.
So the bane of therapists, is not theory. It's self-management. It's being able to understand and stick to a frame, including what the therapist's task is and what it is not. So in PACT, we have a serenity prayer.
Okay.
It kind of goes like this: I am a couple therapist. These people picked each other. They're in each other's care. Therefore, what they do or don't do is not my problem.
I love that.
My only job is to move them toward secure functioning in this life or the next. And then we repeat that. And I am a couple therapist, not an individual therapist, not a family therapist at this moment. That's what I do as a couple. These people picked each other. I didn't. They go home with each other. I don't. They're in each other's care. They have to live with each other. My job, in other words, it's not my problem. It's their problem. That allows a therapist to reframe their position and to gather their seat and not do more than they ought to do, which they already have a lot to do.
Right.
And my only job is not to keep them together or split them apart, but they have to be secure functioning. And so that really helps contain the therapist.
Yeah.
But then we have other techniques because the hardest part is dealing with countertransference, with arousal issues.
Sure.
And something that's really insidious is projective identification. How often the therapist is being pushed around by the partners in a non-conscious way.
Right. And what are some ways that you address projective identification? And is that something that you do within the PACT model, or is that
in the PACT model? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's more advanced. We don't do that in the early trainings, but because that takes some spidey senses of at any given moment, what are my urges? How do I feel about this couple? Do I like this person, or do I dislike them in this moment? As an audience member, do I want to walk out of the show? Do I want to turn the channel if it's television? Is this boring? All of these things. Do I want to attack this person? If so, I may be looking at the wrong one. I should be looking in the other direction. In couples where there's one, there's always the other. Sure. And the person who is not talking is the most likely the one who's trying to get me to do their job for them. So these are some of the insidious ways that couples will get us to do things that it really isn't our job.
Yeah. But one of the phrases that you use is win-win outcomes.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what are the top 3 tips that you give to couples for achieving this outcome?
It's not going to work out well for you as an individual if your partner isn't happy with something you want to do. That's carrying dead weight. Jeremiah, if I want you to do something that you don't want to do, I could use fear, threat, or guilt to get you to do it, but that's not going to last very long, and it accrues bad feelings. We're trying to stay away from threat as best we can. So I have to use attraction, which means that I bargain with you, I negotiate, I make it worth your while. That's how I get you to do things. and it ends up being win-win, so that we don't have anything to remember. That's really the point.
Mm.
That when there is inequity, when somebody is going along with something because they fear not going along with it, or they feel that they're supposed to,
Yeah.
they will start to feel that this becomes very unfair, and that is what builds threat. So it's in my best interest to make sure you are really on board 100%, so we don't have anything to look back on. We don't remember this. We don't go back and litigate this issue.
Yeah.
That's good housekeeping. So we move in lockstep. Think of it as a three-legged race.
Yeah.
If one of us goes down, we both go down. If we pull in different directions, we go nowhere.
Yeah.
So we have to actually work together, which takes a little bit more energy, but it's much, much more worth it. Yeah.
When I'm curious in the development of the win-win outcome and in other practices that you use, when do you decide to use video?
Always.
Okay.
The video is always going. We get permission every session, right at the top, and we often will play it back, but we try to be judicious about that because video can be disruptive.
Sure.
It also can be upsetting depending on how you're using it.
Right.
So it's used. It's a very powerful tool, and it's not only used for playback for them to help them see things, but also for coaching.
Sure.
And it's very, very good for us in terms of studying people, right? We can do microanalysis of behavioral interactions, right? Markers and so on. We can start to do our own clinical research, which is I'm an advocate of.
Yeah.
And that helps us to learn. It's our laboratory, and the therapist can start to place or to start to create protocols that repeat. That sets up basically a little research lab for learning something. So for instance, there are several things I've done over the years that are the same protocol as a way of garnering markers for attachment styles.
Yeah.
I can see the physical reactions, the somatic reactions in people far easier than I can with an attachment interview. So that's one thing. I also use music as a surprise element, their song, the song they fell in love to, as a way to see over and over again how couples react when they are surprised by hearing their song, and to see whether that is a viable intervention or not. Turns out it isn't, but it's a very good evaluative test to see whether the couple is in a very bad way or not. So things like that.
How do you use video outside of session? Like what is your study practice for watching film, for evaluating some of the nonverbal, some of the process that you may have missed kind of after the session?
Well, for me, because I don't suggest my students do this because it's a big responsibility to protect people and to get releases and to abide by HIPAA rules.
Of course.
And that can only be done according to your particular state, right? But what I do or have done, let's say if I know at the end of a particular piece of work, multiple sessions, and a couple ends up, let's say, leaving therapy or breaking up, but I find out that one person was lying throughout the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, there was a female that was lying throughout the entire time, having an affair throughout the entire time, and embezzling from the family funds. Yeah, and so I scoured that video for markers. I scoured it, went backward, and to see what I could start to pick up that would tell me for the next time something to look for or be suspicious of if I were to see the same behavioral markers. So, and I would do that many, many times.
Yeah.
Or if I made a mistake, I believe I messed up, I'm going back to look to see what I did.
Yeah.
Right. And also as a teaching and supervision tool, it's almost irreplaceable because
absolutely.
I can show my mistakes. I can show how easy it is, in fact, how common it is to make mistakes in every session.
Sure.
Just not aware of it. But when you start to comb through your work, you become very aware.
Right.
Because it's not possible to have a perfect session. So,
absolutely.
so it's a really good learning tool. What's that?
I said noted.
No, yeah.
Talking of a perfect session.
No, there's no such thing. Because of the phenomenology, the intersubjectivity of this whole process. So, so it's a very, very good learning tool, and it's a good teaching tool, and it's a good way to understand when somebody's trying to get a consult.
Yeah.
Seeing is much better than hearing, much better than reading. You know, the camera makes mistakes too. It doesn't always show the truth,
Yeah.
but it gets closer than people's report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On your website, stantatkin.com, you wrote a great article called "All People Are Difficult, but you shouldn't be too difficult." It's a brilliant read about personal accountability. And I'm curious, how do you encourage folks to identify the line between difficult and too difficult?
That's a good question. Well, all people are difficult, right? There is no such thing as an easy person up close over a long time, right? Everyone's a pain in the ass. So just with that basic understanding that that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. You never want to end up being too difficult. You don't want to be caught being too difficult. And that here's what it looks like being too difficult. So you and I agree that we're going to protect each other in public and private. We believe that this serves both a personal and mutual good, right? And that means that if you feel that I've embarrassed you or outed you or did something, it doesn't matter my intention. It doesn't even matter whether I agree with it. What matters is that you felt that. We have vowed to protect each other. I apologize. I was wrong. I won't do that. Cue me next time and remind me, because we have terrible memories. So we go into a situation. You tell me, you know, remember, this time just to keep this information to yourself. It's nobody else's business. And then we go, and then I say something. I do it, right? Now it's starting to get a little too difficult, but you remind me, and rather than saying, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, let me square it right now," okay? Rather than doing that, I say, "Oh, come on, you're being too sensitive." That's
too difficult.
It's too difficult, and under principles of secure functioning, that's a fireable offense.
Sure.
Because now I can't trust you. You know, your word is your thing, right? And if you know, I can forgive you reflexes and automation, but once I tell you and give you feedback and cue you and you don't comply, that is kind of like, you know, we're cop car partners, we're in a firefight and you go off and go for coffee. Mm-hmm. I don't think you're getting back in.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's how it should be.
Yeah, great. One more question. This is kind of a fun one. What feedback would you share with other couples therapists who are new to the field?
Oh, it is a blast. I think, first of all, it's the best reality TV there is. You know, it is, you know, I'm spoiled by couples work because that's all I do, specialize. I won't say I don't like individual work, but it is not as exciting to me anymore. But it does take a while to really get your seat here. I mean, these are waters you have to swim in for a while to understand them, and mistakes will abound. But it's a worthwhile thing to learn as a preventionist, somebody who wanted to prevent disorders from infancy by working with mother-infant pairs, mm-hmm. is actually the same thing. You work with a couple, you get them secure functioning, get them to behave properly and to be good managers of each other. The kids come around immediately. And so we consider, you know, secure functioning good for the couple, good for the family, and we also believe it's good for the world. So,
sure.
Yay.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Stan, for joining me.
You're welcome.
Again, invite you to check out the book We Do, buy it on Amazon, buy it at a local bookstore. And then also stay tuned to www.nefs.org for more information about Stan's upcoming training in Northampton. And feel free to look through the website, learn more about how membership can help you advance your career and join the professional community of family and relational therapists.
We also do a lot of couples retreats around the country, and so a lot of therapists come to that and enjoy it. You can get a good idea of what we do.
Excellent. And folks can find out about the couples retreats at stantatkin.com.
Yes, at stantatkin.com, but also thepactinstitute.com.
Okay.
That's where people will learn about trainings and about couples retreats and get other nice materials.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Stan. And
Thank
thanks
you.
for watching this video.